Thank you all for coming tonight. I look forward to getting to know you all better, starting now, but also outside in the field. This all began because I asked Bob about doing some field camps and doing a field walk, one of which is going to happen on Saturday. And he said, you got to do a presentation. And I love doing presentations, but I thought for a long time about the best avenue, the best way to do that. And what I came up with was I really wanted to take the opportunity to share with you all how I have done natural history, how I've taken the lineage that I'm a part of and brought it forth into some pretty spectacular landscapes right here in Arizona. So the presentation we're going to enjoy together tonight, it's really about home. It's about our sense of home. A lot of cultural geographers will tell us that to be indigenous means to have an origin story in the place where you live. So I think the more we create narratives about the place that we live, the more we enhance and increase our sense of indigeneity to place. So that's part of what this is about this evening. Bob said a lot about me. I'll just say a few other things. I lived here from 1992 or 3 until 2005, so 13 years. During that time, I went to Prescott College. I worked all over the American West in places like, well, Bob read the bio already. But I left here in 2005, and it was the result of this really cool synergistic faculty meeting that we had up in the chapel at Prescott College where Paul Smith, bless his soul, posed a question to us. He said, we have this amazing educational model where we take people all over the place into the field to have these amazing experiences, but nobody's leaving here and bringing that to other places. I was young at the time and just kind of raised my hand and said, I'll try that. So I was fortunate enough to secure a position at Sterling College in Craftsbury, Vermont, where I served as a faculty in natural history and ecology for 18 years. And interestingly, that 18-year period turned into a runway right back here to Arizona. Because for the last 7 years of my time there, I was doing field programs here in the Southwest, 84-day field programs that integrated natural history and outdoor skills and some other things like small group dynamics that are good to learn about when you're living with a small group for that amount of time. One of the reasons I tell you that is because, well, Lao Tzu, who is attributed with scribing the Tao Te Ching on some cave walls in Asia long ago, famously said, to go far is to return home. And I have found that to be true. Some of you who have traveled and lived in different places may experience that too. Oftentimes it takes leaving a place for a long time and learning about other places to really contextualize and understand the place that we resonate with as home the most. The other reason I bring that up is this. All the pictures that we're going to look at this evening are from those trips. So you're going to see very amateur photographs taken mostly by me on very amateur photographic equipment. I say that because there are some pretty high-end photographers in the audience here. But they're all original. They're all from places that I and Bob hope that we can bring you to experience field camp life, places like Organ Pipe Cactus National Monument, Kofo Wildlife Refuge, Superstition Wilderness, other places closer to home like Granite Mountain we'll be going on Saturday, and places like the San Francisco Peaks and Grand Canyon. You're also going to see other human beings in addition to other types of beings in the slides that we're going to look at. Most of those are college students with backpacks on. They're dirty. They have smiles on their faces. They're living life on foot, outside, and offline. So I hope that those people aren't you, but hopefully seeing other people out in the natural world will give you kind of a feel for one way that natural history can look when it happens in wild places. Ready to go? Okay. Can everybody see this map here? Not well, but we can see this is a map of Arizona, and folks can see that there are a lot of different colors on the map well enough. Okay, great. How about this one? Tom needs to see it the least because he knows what this map looks like, and it actually belongs to him. Great. We're going to use those two maps. Periodically, I'm going to ask you some really simple questions about these maps from which we'll build some more sophisticated conclusions. This is a new clicker. We're going to give it a test drive together tonight. Ready? So I decided to call this talk 3 Arizonas. As we'll find out very shortly, it could be called 4 Arizonas or 5 Arizonas or 17 Arizonas. But I think just a cursory look at these two maps will reveal a little bit about why Arizona can be considered in 3 different parts. If we look at the southern part of the map here, especially the southwestern portion of the state on this map, what do folks notice about the color? It's pretty uniformly green, and this little legend at the bottom tells us that green is the lowest elevation in the state. And the browns and then the whites are as we move up higher and higher in elevation. So one part of Arizona is relatively low elevation. It's the closest part of Arizona to sea level. Some of you can see the map in more or less detail, but this area right here, it does have some mountains in it, but they're pretty far apart. It's much more valley than it is mountains, right? And as you get further over to the southeastern part of the state, what happens to the mountains? Are there more of them or less of them? More of them. And are they bigger or smaller? They're bigger, right? So this southern area of Arizona is defined by large basins and then widely spaced mountain ranges that get bigger and more frequent as we move over to the southeastern part of the state. Great. That's 1 Arizona. Is that where we live? No, 2 Arizona is this area right here that the Natural History Institute and Tom and others have described as the Mogollon Highlands and done a really great job of creating a kind of origin story for this place that we live in. It's not low elevation basins with widely spaced mountains. It's kind of this tangle of more closely packed mountains and very dissected drainages. Can folks see that from back there? Great. So this area right here, we're going to call the Mogollon Highlands. We're going to agree with the recent literature. What about the northern part of the state? How many folks have traveled up there? Flagstaff, San Francisco Peaks, Grand Canyon. Great. So how would you describe the lay of the land up there? Yeah, we know that area as the Colorado Plateau. And plateau, or table-like, raised and relatively low relief, that's the primary physiographic characteristic of the 3rd Arizona, right? So I'm going to argue that these are very distinctive, different parts of Arizona. And Arizona kind of becomes the Southwest in a nutshell. It's not a thesis. It's just an idea. So for poetic purposes, I like to think of southern Arizona as Sonoran, or as the Sonoran Desert, as Cactus Country. It's not that there aren't cactus in other parts of Arizona, but there are not large, charismatic, person-like columnar cactus in other parts of Arizona. The Mogollon Highlands, that's our home, and I like to call that Creek Country. It's the area of the state where there are the most small, clear, cold streams coming out of a variety of different sources. And the Colorado Plateau, many before me have appropriately called this canyon country. You could also call it plateau country. I think that would be fair, right? Especially in Arizona, where the plateau portion is really the rule. The canyon is the exception. Each of these places has a very distinct geography. In other words, it's in a different place. Has a very distinct physiography, or lay of the land. It has a particular geology, so particular rock types that were in place in certain ages. They all have slightly different climatic regimes. They all have a different story about how life came to be where it is, or biogeography. And they each have kind of classic indicators, plants and animals, that kind of embody the spirit of that place. So now we're going to look at a whole bunch of great pictures. Some of the pictures are content pictures. Some of them are just beautiful pictures, all right? And that's nothing wrong with beauty. We're going to look at them first at the Sonoran portion of the state. And at the end, I'm going to ask some questions, and we'll answer each of these. And then we'll move on to the other two parts of the state. And hopefully we'll have fun doing it. Any questions so far? Ready to roll? What stands out? Yeah, the saguaro, or the tall, singular columnar cactus. If there's a single species that's emblematic of the Sonoran Desert as we experience it in Arizona, it would be the saguaro cactus. Other parts of the Sonoran Desert, maybe not so much. Some people are really drawn to the Sonoran Desert because they feel like they're surrounded by people all the time. Have you all felt that before? You're out there in the Sonoran Desert and there are these charismatic people all around. It's not a mere coincidence, and some of you may know this, that the O'odham word for saguaro is the same as the word for person. And there's a mythology and story around that. But it's not without reason that people feel drawn to this very charismatic desert and oftentimes comment that they feel surrounded by people, often dancing people, like this saguaro and ocotillo. Anybody know who this one is? What do you got? This one's not a cardone, but I can see how you might think that it is. It may look bigger than, yeah, there you go. Stenocereus thurberi. This cactus is the cactus for which Organ Pipe Cactus National Monument is named. And that's a significant national monument down here in southern Arizona, because it's basically the northernmost part of the state where the organ pipe cactus can survive in the wild. So it's a nice little warm pocket. Most columnar cactus are very sensitive to cold, and that's what ultimately limits their distribution. The saguaro is remarkably hardy in the face of cold compared to some of the other cacti. I forgot to mention it, but over here near Carly, right? There's a stack of papers there, and it's a species list of all the plants that are in the slideshow and their common names and scientific names and family names. So after the show, if you're interested in taking that home, please do. I'd love that. And we could talk about the names another time. A lot of them are controversial. The saguaro embodies just about every desert plant adaptation that you would find in the Sonoran Desert. If you go through the checklist, the saguaro has almost all of them. The slide here really is emphasizing the spines on the saguaro. Does anybody know from what we believe the spines derive from? Where did they come from? What did they used to be in the paleontological past? Yeah, we believe that spines are derived from leaves, and obviously there's no longer leaves to serve the purpose of photosynthesis, so how's the plant doing it now? It's photosynthesizing through its bark. Great. So it's an interesting twist and turn of biological evolution that these spines, rather than serving the purpose of using light energy to turn water and carbon dioxide into food for themselves, are actually scattering light and reducing the amount of surface area of the plant that's exposed to sun. That's one of the things that we believe spines do for cactus in the desert now. And if that point were not made in the slide, 2 slides back, the saguaro spines, how about that? Does anybody know who this is? It is a cholla. It is a teddy bear cholla. Should we play scientific name? Cylindropuntia bigelovii. Yeah, Mark knows. Excellent. Does it appear to anybody else but me that these spines are creating a halo-like effect, actually emitting light around the plant? How might that be advantageous to this Terebratchoia? It's increasing its surface reflectivity, or its albedo, right? So the spines are actually not just protecting the plant and breaking up the surface area, they're reflecting light back out away from the plant. And we can see that happening in this picture. None of the pictures have been manipulated. They're all straightforward. No photoshopping here. How about this one? Does anybody recognize this beautiful bouquet of flowers? Yeah, these are the flowers of the ocotillo, who we saw leafed out a few pictures back. Some of you can probably hear the pollinator of this flower right now. It's squeaking. It's a nice high-pitched squeak. Who famously pollinates the ocotillo, these red tubular flowers? This one's not, well, it could be pollinated by moths, but the classic pollinator of red tubular flowers are hummingbirds. And many of you might see that in your backyard if you have some cultivars growing back there. There are two plant families that are the classic indicators of the Sonoran Desert. One of them is the Cactaceae, right? And some of you may know this. The Cactaceae, we believe, has neotropical origins as a family. So it has no, there are no Cactaceae in the Old World except for, I believe, one species in Madagascar that may have been flown over by birds. There are euphorbs and other spiny succulents in the so-called Old World, but they're not in the Cactaceae family. So Cactaceae have neotropical origins, and they have moved up into North America relatively recently. Of course, with the connectivity of Central America around 5 to 10 million years ago, it's increased their populations here. The other plant family that really represents and makes the Sonoran Desert what it is the family that this species, Samota or Corsetia, belongs to. Does anybody know what family this is? A little louder. It's the you could call it the legume family or the Leguminosae. The botanists in the room would say that's okay, you can do that. The current name that's consistent with ending in ACEAE is Fabaceae, which is also known as the pea family. So it's this synergy between Cactaceae and Fabaceae that really make the Sonoran Desert what it is. Each place, as we'll find, has its own kind of synergistic relationship amongst different taxa. And it's the cactus and the pea family that make the Sonoran Desert so rich. Caliandra, beautiful genus name. These are fairy duster buds on the right, and the buds are unfurling. Some of you who know a bit about flower parts might know that what's unfurling in the Caliandra are all stamens. They're just a riot of stamens when they fully bloom. These are spring bloomers in the Sonoran Desert, and depending on elevation, they might bloom as early as March or as late as May. Great name, Caliandra, and the common name, fairy duster. That's a good one too. Aiten's penstemon, or also known as scarlet bugler or scarlet penstemon, Penstemon aitonii. This is a species that you could see growing up into the Prescott area, but it's much more common down in the desert. What's going on with those corollas on the ground? Folks see those? They're detached from the plant. Any speculations on what that's about? Do you think they might be done? Yeah, their work is done. So those corollas are deciduous. That the ones that have dropped off have already been pollinated, or they're all set. One of the joys of the Sonoran Desert, particularly in moist years following the winter rains, is the vernal ephemeral bloom, like these monoptilons or desert stars. Beautiful tiny flowers kind of scattered like confetti across the desert floor. And of course, the more moisture there is, the more of these little ephemeral seeds are going to germinate and go about their life cycle very quickly and they'll be more dense if there's even more moisture. Scarlet hedge nettle, this is not one that you would find on the desert floor. It's a member of the mint family that you would find tucked away in a nice, moist, shady recess. What's that? I didn't hear you. Is that a genus? It doesn't. It may be. I'm not sure. I'd have to look at my list over there. Thanks for checking. Cactus flower. If you study cactus and you watch them flowering, their flowers are, it's a very ancient floral form. They're radially symmetrical. They have all the classic flower parts. So even though the plant family is relatively new and part of the neotropics, its flower structure kind of preserves a lot of ancient characteristics. This is Mammillaria grammii, or a fishhook mammillaria. And this was the first and only bloom that particular year for many, many weeks. So we went and spent a lot of time with it. We have agave here in the Mogollon Highlands as well, a lot of Perry's agave and a few other ones. This one is the largest agave that I've ever seen in the wild. Has anybody ever seen golden flowered or golden agave before? It would be about this tall. So it's a Sonoran Desert classic. This one was in the Superstition Wilderness. They like dry, rocky areas, so kind of mountainous areas. Beautiful, and their flower stalks are tremendous. And a nice stemless Onothera. Nothing like stopping and smelling the flowers. One thing that I have always loved and appreciated about the Sonoran Desert, and I love this about alpine places too, so much of it is about this stunning juxtaposition between these small, intimate moments, like the corolla of an Onothera, and these large, grandiose landscapes and landforms. So oftentimes I find myself looking or working with students near something very close, and we forget, and then there's this moment where somebody takes a step back and was like, do you see those angel wings back there? This place is awesome. And when I go back and look through the slides and pictures, I often see things that I wasn't even aware of before, right? In the Sonoran Desert, most of these tremendous rock formations are new in terms of geologic time. They're what we would call tertiary volcanics. They're almost, the most often, they're volcanic rocks that have extruded in the last 25 million years. And we associate that time period with the extension of the Earth's crust. So the physiography of the Sonoran Desert, these wide basins with these scattered mountains, is all happening in short because the crust is opening like an accordion this way. It's being driven by the same fault system that we know as the San Andreas. And it's because North America is being pulled, the edge of it, very slowly, northwest towards the Aleutian Trench. But it's causing the continent to rift. And that's what's causing all these volcanic rocks to extrude. You break open the crust, the molten mantle from beneath has an opportunity to come up and solidify into rock. So broadly speaking, the Sonoran Desert occurs in basin and range topography, and that basin and range topography is made up of young volcanic rocks less than 25 million years old. So you see saguaro, and they're growing close together, and it's amazing. And behind and between them is this stunning, incredible kind of rhyodacite landscape that's only been around for the last 10 to 25 million years, forming some pretty spectacular mountains. I noticed myself, in a dry year, I spend more time geologically inclined. And in a moist year, I'm distracted by the leaves and the flowers. Like this Perry's penstemon. Has anybody hiked up the Peralta Trail out of Phoenix? I learned recently that the Peralta Trail at one point, was the most visited Forest Service trailhead in the country. When you were there, was it packed? No. Good for you. There were a lot of people when I was there, and I had to work for a long time to get this picture. One landform that the Superstitions is famous for is this one. Does anybody recognize this one? Yeah, this is Weaver's Needle. And not unlike Thumb Butte, our kind of local similar tertiary volcanic landform, this is probably a neck, or the most erosion-resistant portion of a volcanic extrusion, and everything around it is long since eroded and washed away. So the most resistant rock is left standing. And it's similar rock to Thumb Butte. This is a little bit more silica-rich, a little bit lighter in color, a little more aerated. So these volcanic landforms, especially the ones that are very silica-rich, they also tend to form these almost Salvador Dalian landforms, like these beautiful alcoves here in the Superstition Wilderness. It's these types of places, these kind of hidden recesses back against the mountains in a landscape that's otherwise kind of 95% basin and 5% mountain. That's where the water is, back in these recesses. And not coincidentally, that's where a lot of animals tend to aggregate, and not coincidentally, we're one of them. So humans and human ancestors, well, in the case of North American humans, have always gravitated towards these types of spots. And the Sonoran Desert is no exception. Has anybody been hanging out in a mesquite grove down in the Sonoran Desert, and you put your hand down and you're like, wait a minute, I think that's, yeah, potsherds. And once you start seeing potsherds in one place, you develop an eye for them. And like most things, you start seeing them in more and more different types of places. And people learn about and study how to read these potsherds, what color they are, how thick they are, who is likely to have made them, and when. Many of them are hundreds and sometimes thousands of years old. These potsherds are all probably from ancestral Sonoran Desert people, or people who in the past we might have called Hohokam, river farmers of the Phoenix Basin. And we put them all back where we found them. Back in these hidden recesses, one is bound to find other artifacts as well. What do we see just to the right of the Swiss Army watch there? Yeah, it's pretty fantastic to imagine how old that ear of corn is, and who might have sat there eating it in the same spot, the same alcove, 2,000 years ago. So we have some brown-on potsherd. And what about the bones? What do you think the bones might be about? Yeah, it could be people making tools out of the bones. It could be people also have originally breaking them up to get marrow or something out of them in a diet that was famously protein poor. This is, I believe this is a Patian point found in the Kofa Refuge of this part of Arizona, over here. In terms of what we do and what I've done with people when I've had a long time with college students out in the field, basically it's this. We pack all our stuff in backpacks. We hike in to a place that is a great place to practice natural history. We set up a base camp, and we stay there for 3 to 6 days and do excursions and learn about the natural world. And then we move camp to another spot that has something different to offer. We have classes. We sit down, and there are visuals and maps just like these. We learn about ecosystems. We learn about biogeography. We learn about plant identification. We learn about birds, kind of birds in the morning, botany in the afternoon, and geology on the days when we don't do that. We live together as a small group. We travel on foot. We're outside. We're offline. Everything happens analog. 20 years ago, this was not such a big deal. But in recent times, it has become an increasingly popular digital detox for young people to come do these programs. No handheld electronics. Instead, as I was trained to do by my mentors. No batteries required. Nothing wrong with phones, but it's really refreshing to take a break. And I've found, especially for young people who have never experienced a wholly analog relationship with the natural world. So we're studying, we're working on field journals, we're working on species accounts, and this is what the work looks like. All handwritten. And they learn, I don't teach them, but they learn how to do botanical and biological illustrations, and they get pretty good at it. But the thing that we all love to do the most, and I think that we're trained to do as human beings the best, is cruise around and check stuff out. It's the great scavenger hunt that human beings have become so good at. So it's interesting. This southern part of Arizona looks pretty monotypic over here. You all observed, and I mentioned as we move further to the southeast, the mountains get bigger and higher. And some would argue that this means that there's 4 Arizonas, not 3. But for sake of poetic license, I'm just going to say there's 3 Arizonas. And these big mountains in the southeast are part of this larger Sonoran or southern Arizona complex. They just happen to be higher in elevation. We call these the Madrean Sky Islands of southern Arizona. And the idea here is that the mountains are like islands of isolated habitat surrounding by seas of lowland deserts. Seahart Merriam and Humboldt before him told us that every 1,000 feet that we go up in elevation is roughly equivalent to traveling north, or if you're in the southern hemisphere, south, 300 miles away, further away from the equator than wherever you are. And the air temperature cools 3 to 5.5 degrees for every 1,000 feet. So if Phoenix is, let's just call Phoenix 1,000 feet elevation, and the top of the Rincon Sierra is at 8,000 feet elevation, that's 7,000 feet higher. So 7 times 3, 21. So it's the equivalent of 2,100 miles further north, somewhere up in Canada, right? Temperature-wise, if it's an average of 4 degrees cooler for every 7,000 feet, it's 28 degrees cooler up on the top of the Rincons than it is in Phoenix. So we're going to end up with very different vegetation. And when you look at Madrean vegetation, one of the first things that comes to people's mind is, wow, it's wooded. This is woodland. If we look at this map here, what we're talking about are these green splotches in the southeastern portion of the state. But what's wrong with this map from a biogeographer's perspective? No offense to Tom, whose map this is, because he has the other one. This map's part of a much bigger map. And what would you like that map to include to understand where all these plants came from? Yeah, what's around it? Somebody said it. Yeah, south. The Sierra Madre, the mother mountains of Mexico, down here. That's the origin place of many of the species that now grow in these Madrean Sky Islands in southeastern Arizona. So if we have the big map, which does exist, there's a copy downstairs, and there's probably one up in that room there, the amount of green as you go south increases because there's much more high elevation terrain south of southeastern Arizona into Mexico. The Madrean vegetation is kind of characterized by 2 different communities. One of them is this kind of synergy between leaf succulents and grasses. This is classic kind of Apache country here. Leaf succulents like Dasylirion, the sotal, and Schatz yucca, as well as Schatz agave. We also have some familiar plants. I think that the Madrean Sky Islands have a lot of affinity with the Mogollon Highlands. Like, does anybody know who this is? Yeah, it's manzanita. This is point leaf manzanita. This is the one that we have all around Prescott. Arctostaphylos pungens, beautiful flowers. Cool cacti like the Escobaria, the beehive cactus. This also grows out at Granite Mountain. But this doesn't. Does anybody know this one? This is the famous rainbow. It's called a rainbow hedgehog, but it's not a hedgehog. It's a kind of serious, according to the sources that I have. The other community that the Madrean Sky Islands are really known for is dominated by oak and juniper. This look familiar? Yeah, this is Juniperus depiana, our alligator juniper. Again, a lot of affinity between the Madrean Sky Islands and what we have here in the Mogollon Highlands of central Arizona. And oak woodlands. I don't have any fantastic close-up pictures of oaks with leaves and such that are authentic to this place. But I do have some fun pictures of what it's like to live amongst Arizona white oak, which Arizona gray oak and Arizona white oak are presently grouped as Quercus griseae. But some of you may know this as Quercus arizonica. One of the neat things about the Madrean Sky Islands is some of them are double-decker sky islands. So not only do we have green Madrean vegetation growing in the middle elevations between maybe 4,000 and 7,000 feet, but if the mountains are high enough, like Mount Graham and the Santa Catalinas and Mount Lemmon and the Chiricahuas, those mountains get high enough where the climate is even cooler and wetter. So we have a Madrean Sky Island, and on top of that, you get a Petron Sky Island, or a Rocky Mountain Sky Island. And that's indicated by these mixed conifer forests. Most of the mixed conifer forests in the Sierra Madre consist of a variety of ponderosa pine called Pinus ponderosa variety arizonica. It has 5 needles. It's the only so-called yellow pine that I've ever heard of with 5 needles. I didn't believe it when I first saw it, but it's there, promise. Intermixed with Mexican white pine, or sometimes called southwestern white pine, which is closely related to limber pine, but it's more centered around the Sierra Madre than the Rockies. This is the pine cone of the southwestern or Mexican white pine. Yeah, it's cold up there. So briefly, if we say Sonoran, what part of the state are we talking about? South. Great, that was easy. Physiography, or kind of the lay of the land. We've used a term to describe that. Basin and range. Great. Geology, anybody remember the dominant rocks and how old they are? Yeah, less than 25 million years old, predominantly volcanics. There are some other rocks in there too, but we're doing broad strokes here. We didn't talk much about climate, but does anybody know a peculiarity about the Sonoran Desert climatically that makes it distinct from the other parts of the North American desert? Well, you have monsoon rainy season, still waiting for that. And we have winter rains. So 2 rainy seasons, right? Predominantly dry, and in terms of the low country, predominantly hot and dry, but with 2 rainy seasons, which means more biological productivity and more diversity. Biogeographically, we don't have a lot of time to go into this, but for now, we'll just leave it at the Sonoran Desert. This assemblage of cacti and legumes is a relatively new assemblage of plants. It's only existed in its present form for the last 10,000 years or so. The Madrean Sky Islands it's a much more ancient vegetation formation that goes back many more millions of years than the Sonoran Desert. So we can consider this area as predominantly influenced by the Sierra Madre to the south, and this area by neotropical vegetation to the south in the cactus and the legume families that has just so happened to be pre-adapted to success in an area that's becoming increasingly arid. Classic indicators for the Sonoran Desert, we've said it many times, columnar cacti, and what's the other big family? The pea family, the legumes. Great. And home. How can we tell this is home? Can anybody see? Yeah, Thumb Butte. This is taken from Ty Fitzmaurice's rooftop. He likes to watch sunsets. Great. This photograph is pretty anomalous because we're describing the Mogollon Highlands as being the area of Arizona with the highest relief, or the most upsy-downsies, and this picture's flat. There are some areas where tertiary basalt flows have created flat country. Chino Valley is one of those places, and that's covered with these same tertiary volcanics. The whole area around Cordis Junction, same thing. The higher elevation flat surfaces are the home of a lot of Great Basin grassland species, or excuse me, Great Plains grassland species, which is one of the things that makes the Mogollon Highlands so unique. And in this case, who is interspersed amongst the Great Plains grassland species? What are those shrubs? Yeah, those are junipers. And you wouldn't know it. You would think, just looking at this, that maybe these are all one species of junipers. But about every other one of those is a Madrean Juniperus depiana, an alligator juniper. And about every other one is a one-seed juniper, which is the juniper you would kind of expect to see in this habitat. But this is up at 6,000 feet on the Mogollon Rim above the Matazal Wilderness. So there's plenty of alligator juniper there too. So what we did for many years was to travel into the Mogollon Highlands by starting on top at around 6,000 feet and then dropping the rim down into the Matazal Wilderness into what I call the great knot of the Verde River as it moves through some of the roughest terrain that it moves through in the Matazal Mountains. So we'll just share some images from that with you all. We have our good friend, Prescottonian Engelmann's prickly pear flowering. This was in April of 2016, I believe. Many of our experience with the Verde River is in the Verde Valley that's accessible by vehicle, where Camp Verde is, and Clarkdale and Cottonwood and so forth. In the Matazals, the Verde re-enters prime wilderness that's not very far away from Phoenix. You can see the Phoenix city lights. But there are times when we've gone down to this camp and not seen other human beings for 15 days. It's incredible. Our main camp here is, we camp in this mesquite bosque. You can see this is early in the spring season, where all of the herbs, a lot of them introduced from Europe, but still life and good just the same, are emerging underneath the mesquite canopy before the mesquite put their leaves on. This is one of my best friends, also a Prescott College alum, as I am. We went to college together, Matthew Brummett, and he would come out and instruct portions of the course and teach the students how to make many of these implements from natural materials. So we would basically craft hand-drill fire kits, sometimes yucca sandals, agave containers, willow baskets, gourd canteens, all in the tradition of some archaic peoples in the Southwest and some more recent groups of people. A great experiential learning activity for students who are scholars of natural history to engage in. Anybody recognize this tree? I'll give you a hint. It's bigger than most of the ones that we're used to seeing. Yeah, this is Celtis reticulata, netleaf hackberry. Just a beautiful, enormous tree right on the bank of the Verde River. And our desert lupin, also known as a royal lupin, and it has several different names. Anybody know who these guys are? It's called these Mexican gold poppies. It's a variety of California poppy. Yeah, owl's clover. I see you mouthing that. That's great. Out of Castilleja. Desert honeysuckle. Not a true honeysuckle, but a true desert honeysuckle. And there's that Aiden's penstemon again. It gets around. Yeah, sago, it's a Calichordus kennedyi. I'm pretty sure that's it. And some of you may have seen these orange or yellow. This one, there was one growing right near it. I also took a photograph of that was orange. Like they couldn't have been more different. Same species, just doing it a different way. This one's a challenge. Anybody know who this one is? It's a legume. It's got that lupin-like flower. Not all legumes have that, but a lot of them do. I'm not sure who this is, but I'm as certain as I ever like to be that it's a dahlia. But which species of Dahlia it is, anybody know? Dahlia formosa. What do you have a common name for that one?
No, sorry.
Okay. I'm curious what I put on the sheet. I probably put Dahlia spa. This is Apache plume in the rose family. And there's our buddy again, Opuntia engelmanii, the Engelmann's prickly pear. And we just want to get even closer to it. Further up in the Verde Valley, kind of the more inhabited parts of the Verde Valley, there's just an extremely high concentration of ancient people sites that we like to explore. And some of those are sites that you can just pull over on the side of the road and you just look up at the cliff and look, there's some masonry structures up there. Let's go check it out. This site right here is one of those sites, and it's littered with potsherds. I mean, there are hundreds of thousands of potsherds all over the slope below this spot. Most of these sites, archaeologists would attribute to Sonoran culture. The name means without water, but it's a cultural group that we believe may have been kind of intermediary between the ancient Sonoran Desert people to the south, or sometimes called Hohokam, and the ancient Puebloan people, or ancestral Puebloan people, to the north. But the Sonoran were well situated along a prime trade route with perennial water the whole way. And the Verde provided a really important corridor and nexus of activity amongst different cultural groups prior to European contact. These are more masonry structures up on top of the same hilltop where we saw those cliff-built structures. Potsherds. And that is not an unusual concentration for this type of place. Just imagine hundreds of years of chucking the dishes out. That's some beautiful black on white, really just striking and kind of charismatic potsherd. This is also from the Verde Valley area. And like most things, if you're observing them, you kind of get an eye for and learn to see masonry structures. Some of them are very obvious and have national monuments built around them, like Montezuma's Castle. Has anybody ever seen the film Billy Jack? I just watched it for the first time in 35 years or so. And there's a scene where they're all up there, hanging out, just like sitting on the side of Montezuma's Castle, you know, doing their thing. Those were the old days. But the masonry walls were everywhere. In some places, they've been refurbished and restored and are the subject of National Park Service quality parks and monuments, like Tusigut. And in other places, they're not. You're just cruising around, and you think you see something through the trees, and lo and behold, there's something back there. Rock walls built into a limestone sequence. Some of the old sycamores in the Verde Valley proper, I just find to be some of the most beautiful and breathtaking trees on earth, almost especially when they don't have leaves on them. Anybody been to the Crack at Beaver Creek? This is a particular dry year at the Crack. It's an area where even when Beaver Creek is just a trickle, there are reliable deep pools here. And if we're going to call the Mogollon Highlands Creek Country, then it should be for good reason. There's more, I think, reliable, fresh from the spring source water here than any other part of the state. And there are geological and hydrological reasons for that we don't have time to go into. But the area is known for clean, fresh water, swimming holes, and in places, and we'll see one picture of this later on, entire creeks that emerge whole from a hole in the side of the wall. Further over in eastern Arizona is what we call the Mogollon Rim proper. Peter Sherman just said he and his family spent 10 days there recently. That's a good amount of time. Has anybody else spent 10 whole days in a row on the Mogollon Rim? I did once. It was a while ago. But this area right here in particular is known for an abundance of creeks in close proximity to one another. So Tonto Creek, Cherry Creek, Horton Creek, East Verde River, the list goes on. And they all kind of squirt out of the southern edge of the Colorado Plateau, in part because of the water retention of the sedimentary rocks of the Colorado Plateau. And it's an amazing landscape of 7,000-foot elevation mixed conifer forests and Canada violets in Arizona. And Pseudotsuga menziesii, Douglas fir, intermixed with ponderosa pine and white fir. And this is it. This is Horton Creek. Above, that's my wife, Laura Beebe there. Above her, there's no water. It's coming out of the wall, fully developed. All that is water from the southern end of the Colorado Plateau that's been soaking in those rocks for quite a long time. It's under some pressure, but even in the driest year, Horton Creek will look just like that. So what part of the state for the Mogollon Highlands? Central, great. And physiography, how would we describe the relief here? High or low? Yeah, this is a high relief area. It's like condensed. It's like almost like an accordion pleats all the way across here. And we didn't talk about the rocks of this part of the state much. But I'll say with all these creeks and all these rivers and all this erosion, we end up with a lot more different types of rocks, a much wider variety of rocks than we do down in the Sonoran region exposed, including Precambrian granites, like we have at Granite Mountain, all the way from granites that are over 1 billion years old to gneisses and schists that are, and metazol quartzites that are 700 or 800 million years old, to tertiary volcanics that are just a few million years old. So geologically, I would say it's the most varied part of the state. Climate-wise, are we moving away from the equator or towards the equator? And are we moving up in elevation or down in elevation? And what do those things both mean? Cooler and more moist. So instead of under 10 inches of rain, as we have in the Sonoran Desert region, or maybe in the Tucson region up to 12, we're getting up into rainfall in the teens or even above 20 inches in some places like Horton Creek and at 7,000 feet on the Mogollon Rim. Still 2 rainy seasons if our monsoon comes this year. Oh, sorry. Biogeographically, briefly, this area arguably has the most diverse different sources of flora and fauna than anywhere else in the state, right? Because we have Madrean coming up, we have Great Plains coming in from the east, we have Great Basin and Rocky Mountain coming down from the north. We'll spend the least time up on the Colorado Plateau. Every landscape kind of has its reason for being there. It's like feature attraction. And in the Colorado Plateau, arguably, even more so than the other 2 parts of the state, it's very geological in nature. So our species list for the Colorado Plateau will be very short, but the rock features will be a little bit more significant. There are 2 anomalies in Arizona on the Colorado Plateau, and interestingly, they're the 2 things that the Colorado Plateau may be the most famous for. This is one of the anomalies. Anybody know who that is? It's not the best photo. San Francisco Mountain, yeah, where Merriam did his famous study in summer of 1898. What a great summer. I would have loved to have been a part of that. Many people think that Merriam is credited for giving us our life zone concept, but there are plenty of people who had done that before Merriam. Arguably, the most important thing that Merriam did was describe in very in-depth narrative that this particular place in really central Arizona, we think of it as northern, but maybe central Arizona, is the place where boreal floristic elements and what he described as Sonoran floristic elements come together, right? So this was the center of the universe for Merriam in the American West, where everything from the north and the south come together. But what we're going to look in more detail at is the other anomaly of Arizona's Colorado Plateau. Yeah, Grand Canyon. Most of the Colorado Plateau is not the Grand Canyon, but it gives us such a spectacular slice into the Colorado Plateau that it can't be ignored. Does anybody see the Colorado? Some of you all may have heard stories about when the Spanish first got to the South Rim. Does anybody remember how far down they thought the Colorado was? It's 500 vertical feet. And they described it as probably being about 6 feet wide. Some of you have been to the Colorado. It's not 500 feet down, and it's definitely not 6 feet wide. So again, this is strongly a geological place. Not to say that floristically it's not spectacular also. In some ways, Grand Canyon is as much an island as San Francisco Mountain or the Madrean Sky Islands. It's just an island of lowland surrounded by the plateau. So the canyon floor ends up being very Mojavian, very desert-like, even though the surrounding plateaus are 6,000 to 8,000 feet tall. Great place. I mean, it's one of those national parks that's just built for backpacking, and they had people going in with backpacks and exploring the terrain in mind when they kind of laid out the park. We've availed ourselves of that many times. And it doesn't take long once you drop the rim to start encountering geologic wonders like these cross-bedded sandstone standing stones that are at the top of 75 Mile Canyon. The photographs don't do it justice. This is the wall of Palisades of the Desert, which is the steepest escarpment in the entire southern portion of the Grand Canyon. So we're looking at everything from the bottom of the Redwall limestone all the way to the top of the Kaibab limestone. Several thousand feet of vertical relief in one go there. It's just spectacular. All of this kind of due to the erosive action of the Colorado River and its numerous springs and tributaries over the last 60 million years or so, since the plateau uplifted. Has anybody seen this picture before? Or a picture of this feature before? In most geology texts that I've looked at, and I haven't looked at all the geology texts, but I've looked at a dozen geology texts. They all have this picture. It's a famous diabase sill, and geologically, there's a fascinating story here. Does anybody know what diabase is? Everybody heard of that? People heard of basalt? You can think of diabase as basalt that never fully erupted. So the story here is there was a magma chamber deep underneath the Earth's surface, and that red formation, which is that Dox Shale? That red formation developed a crack in it because of extensional faulting of some kind. And the volcanic magma shot up into that crack and then extruded to form that large brown formation above it. That solidified. The remaining material in the crack that did not extrude froze in place and crystallized, and it acts as visible crystals, more like an intrusive igneous rock. So it's one of the famous examples of a dark igneous rock sill that makes it into geology textbooks, and it's right there at Hance Rapids in the Grand Canyon. Anybody know who this one is? This one tricked me for years. I always just called it grizzly bear, prickly pear, and kept walking. And then I saw it flower, and I looked at some maps and some more recent publications on succulents, and I'm reasonably certain this is an unusual, kind of anomalous prickly pear called Nelson's, or Opuntia nelsonii. Maybe some of us can talk about that later. But that's what I put on my species list. Spectacular, kind of almost waxy, translucent, not quite magenta flower petals give that one away for me. Anybody recognize this one? One of the spectacular things about Grand Canyon is we get this intermixing between some Rocky Mountain influences, definitely some Great Basin influences, and Mojavian influences. This is a Utah penstemon, Penstemon utahensis. There are still legumes there, but they've become largely much reduced, like this species of astragalus. I'll leave it at the genus for my own safety. Except this guy. This is another kind of biogeographic anomaly. Arizona redbud or western redbud. Does anybody know where the nearest other redbuds are? Texas and the southeast, so the Carolinas and California. So there's redbuds all around, and then we have this isolated, speciated variety of it in Grand Canyon and certain other parts of the Colorado Plateau, like the Escalante country. Gorgeous flowering tree. We've seen this one before in the Matazal Wilderness. It's another kind of look at Apache plume in the rose family. There it is. Princess plume, Stanleya. This is an unusual species in the Brassicaceae or mustard family with a spike of flowers standing around this tall. And we can see in this photograph that the flowers at the top haven't bloomed yet, at the very top. The ones in the middle are kind of, the top third are in full bloom, and at the bottom we just see the long siliques. Those flowers are already done, and that plant is well on its way to fruiting. So it's a very long bloom, and that usually means that there's a pretty long growing season, so that plant can take its time. It doesn't need to kind of bloom and get it done like a plant up at higher elevation. Anyone? One of the things I love about being a naturalist is saying, I don't know. I woke up a week ago, and I walked into my bathroom. It was early in the morning, and I looked down, and one of these guys was in the toilet. He'd hopped in the back door. Canyon tree frog. They have a pretty large range, and they're the frog that we're most likely to see around this part of Arizona as well. One of the spectacular things about a place like Grand Canyon is getting away from the main river and getting into the side canyons. One year I had the good fortune of traveling with a good friend of mine, Brian Scavone, up to the confluence with the Little Colorado River, which has a much, much different feel and kind of mystique and mythology to it. So we were just there for an evening, but it was a very memorable evening. You can see that the water just has such a high concentration of dissolved minerals in it that it's this kind of eerie, almost opaque blue color. Stunning. And it's, of course, leaving travertine incrustations all over everything that it touches, including you if you go in it. 75-mile canyon as it gets close to the river. This is a canyon that's incised into Chenoumo quartzite, one of the ancient metamorphic formations, a part of the supergroup deep down in the Grand Canyon. These are quartzites that are 700 to 800 million years old. And some metamorphosed conglomerate down there also. This is an unusual exposure. And one of Bob Ellis's favorite formations, Tapete sandstone. And here in this part of the canyon, it's Chenoumo quartzite with Tapete sandstone right on top of it. It's just spectacular. And Doc's shale. One of the nice things about being in the area of Hance Rapids and Red Canyon is there are several great examples of ancient mud cracks. So these are mud cracks that were formed when a lake bed or some other kind of ephemeral pool was drying in place, and then they were covered and preserved for hundreds of millions of years, much like these ripple marks. These are ancient preserved ripple marks. These are the types of places where one would not be astonished to find a dinosaur track. Maybe more on this one another time. Briefly, this is one of the springs on the south rim of the Grand Canyon. And on the south rim of the Grand Canyon, for reasons that we don't have time to go into right now, most of the water that comes out in the springs is already many, many thousands of years old before you ever have a chance to drink it. So it's had every opportunity to dissolve minerals in it. So there you are in the Grand Canyon. You don't want to drink the Colorado River unless you really have to. You travel days and you get to this spring and you drink it. It's not exactly thirst quenching. It almost tastes brackish. Beautiful ventifacts down along the river corridor where high winds transport sand and gravel and cause this level of aeolian erosion in rocks like sandstone that are not very erosion resistant. Just spectacular. This is I think this is the Zoroaster temple viewed from Cremation Creek. So northern Arizona, a plateau with the big mountain and a deep canyon. One of the most spectacular sequences of Paleozoic seafloor sediments in the world, with ancient basement rock in the inner gorge, over 1 billion years old. It's the part of the state that's the least influenced by summer rains and the most influenced by winter storms. We're getting further up into the temperate regions and further away from the sources of the monsoons. Biogeographically, it's the least influenced by the tropics. It's not very influenced by Madrean. It's more influenced by the Great Basin and the Rocky Mountain and a little bit the Mojave. Classic indicators, I would say sedimentary rocks. Great. I'll leave us with this. And maybe for those folks who are coming on the field walk on Saturday, maybe we'll come back to this. This idea that each place is its own place. Forever, eventually, wild. That's a quote from poet Gary Snyder.
Thank you, David. I think we have a few minutes for questions. If folks need to leave, you can go ahead and please do that. And David, answer a few questions for us. David, would you mind repeating the questions so that we pick it up on the live stream?
Sure, no problem.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You showed a picture of the ripple, the red ripple. Where is that?
That's just up. Do you know where that is?
I was just going to say, repeat the question.
Okay. The question is, the ripple marks that were in the slide, just a few slides back, where were those ripple marks from? If you go down the Red Canyon Trail, or the New Hants Trail, from the south rim of Grand Canyon, you'll pass those ripple marks right before you get to the Colorado River. It's a long walk. That's why I brought it for you. A couple more? Yeah.
What time of year was the Great Canyon trip that you had?
All the slides that you all saw were from springtime. So the ones down in the desert were from February, March. The ones in the Mogollon Highlands were from March, April, and the ones in the canyon were from April. Mm-hmm.
What is the age and source of
Yeah, the question is, qualified to give the specifics. I can vaguely and certainly say that it's a tertiary volcanic formation. So it's formed in the last 25 million years, 30 million years at the most. And I believe the rock type there, despite kind of popular vernacular, is rhyodacite. So it's actually much more silica rich than a lot of people colloquially would think that it is. It's not basaltic. And it's also believed to be kind of the center of a once more vast volcanic flow. Yep.
There's a lot of discussion about what's going to be happening in the Glasser Hill area. And I just wondered, is Glasser Hill of great geological significance that we can use that fact to help us even?
Have you ever, so the question is, is the Glassford Hill is its geological significance a useful tool to try to save it from human development, I assume that you mean. I think it's spectacular. And particularly, some of you all may have come around Glassford Hill and you're kind of on the north, yeah, and you can see into it, and you can see the cone in the center. I think that's world class. I'd love to see it just stay like it is. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you have the tertiary volcanic hill, and then you have the Precambrian granites right next to it. Yeah, I think that's spectacular. How about one more? Someone else? Mm-hmm.
Your longer field trips coming up, or you're going to tents?
Yeah, so briefly, the model for the field camp set that we have in mind is not a wilderness trip, not a backpacking trip, but a rendezvous at a campground like the Organ Pipe group campsite down at Twin Peaks that has amenities like bathrooms and showers, where people can come and bring their own tents, and we'll give people some suggestions for camping style and easy to prepare food. And we get together and we practice natural history. So there will be a program, we'll wake up in the morning and go bird watching, we'll go botanize in the afternoon, have some star talks and hang out around and share stories in the evenings, eat food together. It's not intended to be an all-inclusive kind of ecotourism package, but rather a gathering at a campsite with amenities where we can go practice and get out there together. Thanks for asking that. Thanks, Bob.
Very good. Let's give David a round of applause, please. As is our practice here, we like to give our presenters a Natural History Institute hat. And so here's your hat.
Thanks, buddy.
Thank you all for coming out. The gallery's open, and David will be around if you want to chat with him.
Oh, and if you're interested